for coming. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to another episode of Burn the Wagon, where we're here to burn the wagon that is patriarchy, capitalism, and colonialism. As the stage burns, I just want to put some prayers up for Ukraine and all the people suffering out there. Also want to send some prayers up for all the people out there that are suffering from domestic violence, everyone that's suffering from mental health issues, anybody that has been murdered or has gone missing. I want to also send prayers for yourselves for being here today and listening to these conversations and just existing. And I also want to put prayers up for precious Mother Earth. So thank you for joining Burn the Wagon, and where we are here to burn the wagon that is patriarchy, capitalism, and colonialism. So today my guest is Alli Wilson. So thank you for joining me here today. And so we'll start off with a little intro about yourself and just let the people know who you are and where you're from.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Alli. I am 30 years old. Been living in Santa Cruz for about 7 years, I think 8 almost. And I'm a teacher. I teach 5th grade in Watsonville, and that's been my life for a while. And I'm a mom, a wife, and I'm shifting careers right now, trying to get my graduate my license eventually, but my master's degree in mental health counseling.
Oh, okay.
So, getting the heck out of teaching.
Okay. So you said you moved here, you've been here for a while. So where did you move from originally?
I grew up in Arizona. So I was born in a suburb of Chicago. That's where my dad's family is all from, called Evanston. And then lived there like a year maybe when I was a baby, but I grew up pretty much my whole life in Arizona, in Phoenix. So came out here, and that's the 2 main places I've been. Okay,
yeah, because we worked together at Gail's Bakery for a while. And then my first question I want to get into, because then I remember you leaving for teaching. And what really got you to dive into teaching, and what really started all that motivation for you to be a teacher?
There's not really a big moment. I just know that when I was a little kid and they always asked me, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? That was always my thing. I said teacher. And when I was thinking about it, I don't know, people probably have, a lot of kids say that, I think, because, you know, your teacher in elementary school at least is like your first adult other than your parents, I think, that you build like a healthy relationship with. So I don't know, ever since I was a little kid I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, and then that never really changed to anything else. So I got my bachelor's to do that in Arizona.
Okay.
I never taught in Arizona though. I just got my credential because I knew I was moving over here. And then once we came over here, worked at Gail's to make some money until I got my credential over here, and then that's when I left and started actually teaching.
How has that been as a woman of color, as a teacher in that field?
It's been interesting because where I teach in Watsonville, it's like primarily Hispanic population, so I don't know, it's interesting. I teach my kids a lot about, you know, racism. But it's always interesting because it's like there's stuff that I can't really level with them because it's like everyone in the classroom is all Hispanic. So like they're the majority in that little bubble. But I'm sure some of them have definitely experienced, you know, racism in other places, but
how was it going to school in Arizona? Was that like a...
Yeah, Arizona's definitely a different world. I mean, I was like always the token black kid in the class. And honestly though, like I always grew up thinking that Arizona didn't have a lot of black people, which compared to a lot of places it doesn't. And then I moved over here, and then I was like, oh, this is really not a lot of black people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely, you know, there's definitely a lot of racism I experienced in Arizona. More like overt, you know, people are just outward about it, whereas over here it still exists, just a little more subtle. Yeah,
and you said it's Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've honestly never been out of California, to be honest, so I've only heard stories about how Phoenix is in Arizona. In high school, did you ever have to deal with those type of, like, obviously, like, the overt racism, or was it just in college that you...
I don't even think really I experienced it in college. It was high school and, like, middle school. Even from, like, one of my teachers in high school, where I was telling... I've told people about this now and never really thought about it till I was an adult, and I was like, yeah, that was kind of fucked up. But this teacher that I was close with, because it was a class that I took, like, 4 years, so, like, I'd been, you know, around that person for a long time. And conversation was about, like, you know, my mix, because I am mixed, so I was telling him, like, I'm half black, quarter white, quarter Mexican, and his response, as a joke, he was like, oh, well, you're half all right. And, you know, as a teenager, I was like, I laughed it off because I didn't know any better, and also didn't really realize, like, the weight of it, and it was, like, I was kind of used to stuff like that, you know, growing up over there. So then now, I mean, in grad school, you know, and I'm, like, at a very... inclusive university, so like I've had a multicultural course, which is, you know, I think really like a course for white people.
Yeah.
But just talking about stuff in that, we had to, you know, like think back on issues that we've had or experiences we've had, and so I kind of like laid out all those things, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely one that stuck with me, even though at the time as a teenager, like I didn't really think anything of it, but yeah, there's definitely stuff like that that's happened.
That's crazy that you bring that up, because I was just thinking the other day, is a phrase what I would used to hear in high school is, you're not like the rest of them, talking about, like, I'm not the rest, like the rest of the Res Boys, because we're, you know, we're like, everywhere we go, we're pretty crazy, we're pretty loud, we make a scene, you know what I mean, and a white dad told me, you're not like the rest of them, and that's just, like, takes me back to just, like, I didn't like, I was just like a kid, like you were saying, I didn't really think about any of it, but like, in Puerto Rico, I experienced, like, a lot of racism, and thinking back on it, it's like, wow, I just, like, sat there as a kid, you know, didn't really say anything. So it's like, it's like, I'm happy you shared that story, because it made me think of that as well, you know. As kids, we don't really realize it, and I don't think I wanted to say anything, because I was just like, what do I even say to that? Like,
yeah, I think. Yeah, you don't know what to say, but even also, like, now, well, I think two things. One, like, probably for both of us, when you're younger, like, you're not that strong in your identity.
Yeah.
So it's like, you hear something and you're like, okay, maybe. But I feel like now we're both very, like, this is who I am, this is what I represent, this is what I stand for. But I think even still, like, if someone were to say something racist to either of us, or even, like, a microaggression, like, you still don't know how to react sometimes, you know, even if you are, I mean, I don't know, speaking for myself personally, I know that, like, sometimes someone will say something, and, like, in the moment, especially if it's, like, a microaggression, you kind of, like, are like, something was weird about that, but, like, in the moment, you don't always know, like, what it is. At least that's my experience, and then sometimes I'll, like, go home and think about it, and, like, I think it was this thing, or I took this course that was, like, it's called, like, self-care and radical healing for, like, BIPOC clinicians. So it was really cool. It was the biggest, it was on Zoom, but the biggest, like, group of black, like, PhDs and counselors and, like, all these doctorates and professionals. But I was allowed to go as a grad student too. But someone was talking about that, about, you know, microaggressions, and, like, that was their thing of, like, if you ever have that questioning of, like, was this a thing? Like, trust that. Like, yeah, it was. That's what it was. Like, so if you ever have that feeling of, like, did they mean it? And, you know, maybe, like, someone was well-intentioned, but they said something, but it's still, like, you know, trust that in yourself, because I think that's a lot of, like, the questioning. You know, if you grow up as a person of color, you're always, like, questioning, like, are they looking at me because of this, or are they looking at me because of this, or did they say that comment because of this or this, which I think is a stressful way to live, but... Yeah, it is a very stressful way to live. And you're doing a lot, you say you're trying to transition into mental health, and I didn't have this question lined up, but I just kind of want to talk about mental health issues, because that's a big thing, and for me, I'm you know, just recently opening up to, like, the mental health issues, so yeah, let's just kind of get into mental health, and, like, like, what are you wanting to, how is your approach to it? What are you wanting to, what field in that aspect are you wanting to get into? So I'm going into mental health counseling, which I think is like a relatively new profession. So that was like one of my first classes, learning all the difference of like psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, counselor. They're all kind of like, you know, I think they call it like the four sisters of whatever, psychology or mental health or whatever. So counseling is like one of the newer ones, and just, yeah, more focused on like the whole person, you know, not as like medication focused as like a psychiatrist. And also the schooling is less, so I don't need to get like a PhD. My program is like 2 years and a quarter. So I'm trying to go the marriage, family, child counseling route, because you could do that, or you could do emphasis in just like licensed professional clinical counseling. I'm learning all the acronyms.
Yeah.
PCC. And that one's just like you could see anybody. I don't think you can see kids though, which I obviously love kids because I'm a teacher, so I definitely wanted to go that route. And I believe a lot in, you know, the family as like a micro society. So I think a lot of our issues are from something that happened in somebody's childhood.
Absolutely, no,
it didn't
absolutely,
happen. So that's kind of the route that I wanted to go, just to. Also, you know, as a teacher, like you're dealing with mental health stuff with kids all the time, anyways. But then it's like, you know, this kid's going through some crisis, and then you're like, okay, let me teach you guys about these fractions.
Yeah.
So I just am like over that part. I really never cared that much about the academic part, honestly. I always was more focused on like the social emotional skills and like those type of lessons and American history because that's what we learn in 5th grade. So that's mainly what I've been focusing on teaching my class, and then just, ready to get rid of the rest and like just have that be my main focus and working with kids or families.
I spoke with your 5th grade class, and I forgot how like they asked questions. I was like going into it, I was like, I don't know like how I want to like form my answers, like how I need to like have it clean as possible. And then like one of the first questions was like, what weapons did you use? And it's like, oh yeah, these are 5th graders. You know, I got to remember what I was like in 5th grade. I was very rambunctious and very like eager to like find things funny and like, you know, and it was amazing. They were all really good questions. But yeah, it must be a challenge to go in and have to deal with, you know, those questions. And then, like you said, they're dealing with things in their own homes, and they don't know how to deal with this issues. You know, some of these issues are mentally like not there yet. You know, so it must be very tough for teachers to have to guide that. And then, like you said, here's some mathematical question that you'll probably never use after this class.
I think that's why this year's really, like, particularly hard. I've taught for, like, 7 years now. I've taught 5th grade for, like, 5 or 6. This year, though, all around, like, I think every grade is just particularly hard. Because I think of last year distance learning and just, like, everything I'm learning with my degree, you know, it's, like, I think a lot of the stuff that was difficult about the beginning of the year anyways was, like, just behavior, like, constantly dealing with that with kids. Which normally in a school year, like a little bit in the beginning, you gotta like, you know, this is how the classroom works, teach them all that stuff. And then they kind of fall into it, but this year it was like well into October, even like maybe November, just like constantly still behavior stuff, because I think it is like a trauma response, you know, because last year online learning, like that alone, I think was like a major disruption to their lives, you know, it's like school's so important to kids. And that's where they see their friends and all that. And so that alone was an issue. And then, like you said, who knows what stuff was happening at their home that whole year, you know, when they weren't coming to school. So definitely a lot of mental health issues in kids right now, especially. And I'm seeing that in my class a lot too. And so that's when, for me, it was even more like, you're not going to even learn what I'm teaching right now because you're thinking about whatever. So I've really been doing a lot of, like, mindfulness, trying to teach them stuff with that, and the social emotional lessons, and like I said, American history is a big one. That's like the 5th grade standard for social studies. So that's why we had you, because we were learning about, well, like pre-Columbian Native Americans. But that's why like you, or one year I had some other guy come, just so that they can like see there are Native Americans still around today.
Yeah.
Especially because in California, I don't know.
In this area, there's not. And when I moved here, I didn't find anybody that was identified as Indigenous in 2000. What was that? 2013. I mean, I wasn't out there just like, hey, where's all the Indigenous people? But like, I didn't run into it any like that many, and now that like it's it's in the media. It's a little bit more than the Amamutsan tribe, the Ohlone tribe. If I'm saying that correctly, they're starting to get their names back up and that's amazing because I didn't realize that there's like 3 different tribes here that existed here at one point in time, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Until I went to the Remove the Bill at the mission downtown, and that was an amazing event. And it's messed up that, like you're saying, like these people aren't aware that these people we're still here.
Yeah, because there was a couple of years back I remember a class where I'm like, okay, and this is like the 1500s, all these tribes they just learned about, and I'm like, what about now? Like, are there Native Americans around now? And there was one year where they were like, no, like they were dinosaurs, like extinct or something. I was like, yeah, they are. That's when I was like, they need to see a real, person that they can relate to. So I appreciate you zooming with us that day.
And thank you for having me. And that's kind of like my my thing with this podcast too is, I'm tired of hearing in the past tense, and I'm tired of like looking in these history books and not seeing what we want to see. It's just, let's do it ourselves. Let's verbally do it ourselves. Yeah. And these videos can exist for a long time because it's the internet, and everything lasts on the internet forever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I want to get into my next question. We're kind of talking about Watsonville and it mainly being a Hispanic Latinx community. Let's shift to Santa Cruz, where, like we said earlier, it's completely whitewashed. And lately we've been having groups like Black Surf Club, Black Health Matters, and there's a couple other ones that are popping up, and it's amazing to see, And then there's actually a barbecue tomorrow hosted by Ayo Banjo. I'm going to be there too. So yeah, guys, check that out tomorrow. How do you feel about being in a place like this, but also, as of late, all these groups popping up and kind of bringing people together?
Yeah. I'm stoked about all this stuff happening now because I'd say probably the first 5 or 6 years that I lived here, kind of like you were saying, like earlier, you're like, I wasn't seeking out Indigenous people, like, where you at? Like, I felt like I was like that about, where all the Black people. Like, I remember, Googling one time, Black people meet up. There was nothing at the time. But, yeah, I definitely, in retrospect, and at the time, it definitely affected me in a big way, which I never thought it would, but, I felt super isolated living here and, kind of depressed about it, I think, and just, so once I started seeing the tannery and, the Black Health Matters initiative and that stuff popping up, I was, jumped at those events right away, especially because they were free and they were about, getting people outdoors, and I was like, I'm just trying to meet some other Black people. So I started going to, a lot of those, and it's cool because now I feel like, there is a community, and, I'm a part of it, or, if I go to those events, I'm like, oh, yeah, I know this person, I know that person, so that's definitely cool. And it's a big shift because I remember when I was, pregnant, thinking about, do I want to raise my daughter here? Because, I mean, she's very fair-skinned anyways, but, do I want her to just grow up and, never see people of color? And I didn't, so I was like, I don't know, we're going to move to, San Jose or somewhere else. But, that, all those groups popping up and that community kind of, growing stronger definitely makes me feel better, because I've taken her on some of the hikes and stuff too, and I think that's a big thing even for her to just see a group of Black people. And everybody's always super awesome at those events, and one of the hikes we went on, I had her and I was carrying her basically the whole time, in a backpack, but people were like, let me carry your stuff, or like, do you want me to hold her, you know? So it's like definitely a community, and I want her to see that too and grow up with that. So
yeah, it's amazing to see it, and like you said, every time we go to an event, it's like, hey, what's up, or like, I remember from last time, and like everyone follows each other on Instagram, and then the support everyone has for each other on Instagram is amazing. You know what I mean? And when I posted this on the story, a couple people were like, "Oh, I met her at the hike last week."
Oh,
so
nice.
it's like, you know what I mean? So it's amazing. So they're like, they're stoked on it, and they're stoked to see it. And there's other, like you said, there's other kids at these events too that other kids can play with. There's usually like some types of arts and crafts going on at these events for children, and that's mainly what it should be all about, is the children.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, you love the kids. You know what I mean. You love doing it for kids, and seeing things like this happen. Like you said, seeing a group of people that look like you is amazing, and it makes you feel amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm tired of walking down the street and seeing fucking Chads and Brads and shit. You know. And yeah, the Santa Cruz is like, I love it, but like I said, it's a little bit whitewashed. But you know, groups like this are popping up, and more people are coming together. So yeah, I'm stoked on things like that happening too. Stoked to be a part of things like that. So yeah, all you guys follow those groups out there. Whoever's watching, Black Health Matters, Black Surf Club, Speak for Change podcasts.
Tannery World Dance, and then yeah, I'm pretty sure those are all on Instagram. Yeah. Even honestly, like there was an event that they were putting on that was like a yoga thing. Also Indigenous in Nature, you should follow, because they link up with them a lot. They're a group from Oakland, and because I mean, there's not that many Black people here, so like this barbecue tomorrow, right? They're linked up with like Indigenous in Nature to kind of like pump it up, get more people, whatever.
Yeah.
But they were doing this yoga thing at the tannery. They were supposed to be, but they ended up canceling it. But I didn't see the notice or whatever, so I went there, and then I was like looking around. I didn't see anybody, and then there was like this little cafe or something open. This chick like waved at me as I was walking by, and where the yoga thing was supposed to be, nobody was there. So I just walked back to that little cafe and I was like, "Hey, do you know about this thing?" And she was like, "No." She was like, "But you know, maybe you're meant to be here." And I was like, yeah, I believe it. And so it ended up being, it's called like African Roots, I think, but it's this woman, Yasmina, who she's trying to like start, like that space has been sitting empty at the tannery for a while, so she's trying to just like start up a social space, you know, where people can go and meet and hang. So
we need more things like that, you know, and like you said, like more outdoorsy things too.
Yeah.
Because I know I tend to just like, once I get off work, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna sit there and not do much and look at my phone, and I can feel it in my like brain and my eyes and shit. At the end of the day, it's like, okay, like I need some type of like outdoor, like at least need to go on the porch and like feel it, you know. But yeah, I love the encouraging of outdoors, because I get a little lazy and sit indoors, and that's not good for your mental health. Yeah,
I know. That's why I appreciate that. That's a big angle I think that they're working at too, is like getting people of color together, but also like getting them outdoors, because and I think for a long time, like county parks and state parks and stuff is stuff that places where, I don't know, a lot of people didn't feel comfortable to go, or like that came up on the last hike we went on. Somebody was asking about, or somebody made a joke about like, yeah, you know, Black people don't want to go hiking in the woods or something, and that somebody, I think he had an accent, I think he was English or something. He's like, what? But why? He didn't understand. He's like, wait, why? Like, you're being serious? People are scared to go outside? Like, why? And then he's like, because there's trees, you know, like, we joking about lynching, but everybody was kind of like, I mean, yeah, like, historically, like, people didn't feel safe going out there. You don't want to get caught out alone.
Yeah. And I love the phrase, taking back the outdoors, because, you know, in my community, like, it was, if you're like a hunter or you're like a outdoorsy type, you're either a redneck or you're white. If you're doing hiking, you're a white person. It's like, yo, like we used to do that shit too, like all along this like country, this whole country, like, and like all that was just taken from us. For some reason, it's like, why are these things considered white when you're doing like hiking or you're being an outdoorsy person? It's like we as people of color used to do that shit everywhere, no matter where it was. So it's like, it's not like considered just like a white thing.
Yeah, I know. I was seeing something recently too on Instagram of somebody talking and just saying that like it doesn't take long to lose that connection to the outdoors. You know, it's like maybe 2 generations. If, like your grandparents never took your parents camping, then they're not going to take you camping, and then you're just used to not doing stuff like that. So definitely, I felt that too when I went on that one hike I was talking about, where I was like carrying my daughter in the backpack and all that stuff, and it was a big group because Negus and Nature had come down too, so it was a pretty big group of Black people, and we're all walking through like Henry Cowell, and it's the feeling of, you know, like in Santa Cruz, you know, like people are walking by like turning heads, you know, like, oh, what is this group? And it just felt good finally to be like, yeah, we out here.
You know, I guarantee people's first like initial thought is they don't live here.
Yeah.
I guarantee that. Because like you said, it's there's not that many like just people of color. Just, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, indigenous people of Southern America, but as far as Black people or like as indigenous, you know, you know, there's not that many. But like these groups are definitely bringing out more, you know, and I love it. It's amazing because I've made so many connections and had made so many friendships from these little, like, I've only gone to like 3 or 4 events recently, but like the connections we've made at those events is amazing.
Yeah.
And I'll take those connections over like the connections I used to make back partying like 100 times over, you know. But yeah, I think that's all the topics I had. But unless you had any topics that you wanted to bring up, you wanted to promote anything, talk about any. It is still Black History, so we can talk about something like that.
Sure. If
you wanted to bring up any people of Black history that you really motivate you in life. I know people like to talk about Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. Is there anybody that's not in the limelight like those guys that you really look up to, like any rioters or anything like that?
I mean, I look up to all of those people, yes. But I have been trying to, like, in my class to bring up people. I mean, to be honest, like, I really haven't talked to my class about Martin Luther King all year because I'm just like, you guys know who he is.
Yeah, and that's...
Rosa Parks, okay, yeah, you know. So I did try to bring up, like, you know, other people that are kind of not as in the limelight. And actually today I read a book, which I think you were talking last week with Tyree about this, too. This guy, Carl G. Woodson. He's the founder of Black History.
Yes, yeah, we were.
I just read a book to my class today. I think it's a pretty new book today because I honestly had never heard of him either until I read this book, which I was hearing like earlier in the month. I don't know, people like T-Pain or like, you know, some Black people that are like, we shouldn't celebrate Black History Month. They're saying that, like, you know, Black history is just American history, so like we should stop celebrating this as like a separate thing, which I was kind of like muddling around with that thought because I had never really thought of that either. But after reading this book today, though, I was like, okay, no, I think it's still important, especially to, you know, learn about the story of the founder, who basically, like, his parents were slaves, and he was like the first, I think it said he was the first Black person whose parents were slaves to get a doctorate degree. And he went to Harvard. But when he was at Harvard, and he was getting his doctorate in history. So when he was at Harvard, and this is in the book, children's book, but the professor, one of his white professors, was like, Black people don't have a history, is what he told him. And so then he was like, well, fuck you, professor. I'm gonna like make this whole thing. So that's what like kicked off him like starting, it was like Negro History Week or something that eventually developed into Black History Month. But yeah, when I read that part in the book today, I was like, okay, yeah, we need to still have it, because I also just believe that, like, you know, there are some people who will go all year and never think about a Black person at all.
Yeah.
So it's like, at least I was telling my students this too. I was telling them the whole thing of like the argument of, you know, should we get rid of it or whatever. But just like, you know, at least maybe, hopefully for those people, there's like some knowledge that comes that they wouldn't have otherwise seeked on their own.
Yeah, that's I didn't think about it like that. What is one of your favorite black movies, like like Boys in the Hood or anything like that that's written by and directed strictly by black directors, black writers?
Well, I mean, that's where I'll probably admit that I'm uneducated.
Okay.
I haven't watched a lot of those movies, honestly. So I don't know. What's your favorite one? Maybe we'll watch it.
I mean, like, all those are really good. Boys in the Hood, Don't Be a Menace.
I have seen that when I was a kid. Good. I remember my mom watching it.
A lot of those are really good. I'm blanking honestly right now.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, movies. Honestly, my husband will probably be able to tell you more movies that he watches of those that I've seen. But
Juice with Tupac, it is really good. Yeah. So, I actually was like reading. I wanted to bring this up when we were talking about like inspirational people, but I saw the other day the inventor of like space heaters. Way back, it was a black man, and like I just want to like highlight more people like that who aren't really like in the limelight or haven't really been given credit.
But we use their stuff every day.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because like I'm finding out things like that a lot. You know, like the inventors of the sunglasses were the Inuit people up in Alaska, like stuff like that, and that we aren't really like taught, but like like you said, we use them every single day.
Yeah.
But like you think it's you know, it's a white man's world, so it was invented by a white man. You know?
Yeah, that's something that I try to do too. Well, like this year, like I said, I teach American history in 5th grade, so it's like we're talking about this stuff all year long. That's what I told my kids. I was like, when February started, I'm like, yeah, February's Black History Month, but I'm not gonna make a big deal about it because like we've already been talking about this stuff all year. But also, you know, the opinion of like during this month, I don't know, there's just a lot of like negative displays of like black people even, or just, you know, it's about like slavery and discrimination and like the struggle, but I've been noticing like a big push to just like celebrate black joy and, you know, like more positive representations.
Yeah.
And so when that was one year I had my class look through this little website that I had found that had like 15 black inventors, and they had to like write about a couple, but I couldn't find that website again this year. But another thing that I liked doing though was like learning about jazz history, because that's, you know, like born out of, you know, the Harlem Renaissance or whatever. So we've been learning about like different jazz artists and listening to music. Actually, one of my students today, he was like, came up to me and he's like, hey, Miss Wilson, can we do the next one on Ray Charles? And I was like, yeah, I didn't think about Ray Charles, but he's a great one. He was like, can you play that song? I'm not going to remember now. Hit the Road, Jack. Which was like, I really like that one. I was like, all right, we'll do that one on Monday.
That's funny, yeah. It's crazy how many inventors and stuff exist out there that aren't really highlighted, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and the kids get it too, you know, like I had messaged you when you posted something about the Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
Know,
that you're teaching
banned.
it,
Yeah. Well, one of my reading groups, we were reading a book about that, and we just had the conversation. You know, that's why I love 5th grade, because like they, you know, they're still in tune with like, I don't know, really basic ideas. You know, like you teach them something really complicated, but like they get the gist of it. And so even like Trail of Tears, I was reading that book with them, and I think it was like the next day after I saw that thing you posted, because I was telling them, like, just so you guys know, like, there's laws being passed in our country right now to, like, ban books like this when we're reading from schools. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, why? I'm like, I don't know, why do you guys think? And they all just, like, you know, hit the nail on the head of, like, one girl's like, well, they just want kids to only know the, like, good parts of history, and they don't want them to know the dark things, so that they think America's, like, just a fair place. I was like, okay. And another kid's, well, one boy's like, it's racism. I was like, kind of. And another kid is like, it's funny because at a certain point in the year, they kind of just, like, parrot things that you tell them, you know, which is funny. And something I will miss, you do have a lot of power as a teacher. Like, you could really brainwash 30 kids if you wanted to, whatever you want, but, you know, there's a point where they start, like, you know, repeating things that you've said, and I told them the phrase of, like, you know, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it or whatever the code is. And so that was what one boy's response was of like why they're banning books like that. He's like, well, we should know this stuff because if we don't, then history's gonna happen again. Like stuff like that. I'm like, good job, kids. Okay, I brainwashed you well.
I wonder where like where our history books are printed. Where like
I think it's Texas.
Yeah, that's because I saw something like that, but it was on I saw it on social media, so and I didn't really look into it. That's wild. That majority of our history books are made in Texas, but. Wow. I don't know. That's pretty crazy.
Well, the social studies books in my room, they all sit on that shelf over there. We don't touch them all year. But that's like what I teach them too. You know, it's about perspective, and you know, most stuff in that book is written from like a certain perspective, and you know, they easily come to the conclusion of like, okay, it's a white male perspective. Even like we teach about the Constitution and all that stuff, and so. I had shown them, there's like a famous painting of like the founding fathers, you know, when they're at the Constitutional Convention. And in the past, like last year on distance learning, that was like a specific assignment that I made where I was like, okay, look at this picture, like what do all these people have in common? And, you know, last year I remember like really having to draw it out of them that like that they were all white and they were all male. But this year I wasn't even really digging for that because like I wasn't doing that as the assignment. The picture just came up in some other thing. And one girl raised her hand. She's like, "How come there's no girls in that picture?" And I was like, "Yeah, what?"
Very good
and
point.
I was like, "What else?"
Yeah.
And they're always like, they all have white hair, and I'm like, "Yeah." They're all dressed the same, which I'm like, "Yeah, they are like wealthy people. Yeah. They're all in those nice clothes." And they're like, "There's no," or they're all white. You know, they easily came to that, and then they're like, "There's no children." I'm like, "Yeah, kids didn't have any say of what happened."
Yeah.
So they definitely understand, you know, and that's kind of the thread I've been, like, weaving back of that. You know, you remember that picture we looked at? Being, like, the perspective, even, you know, like, children's books, it's the same thing, you know. Yeah. You're like, I don't know the stats. I actually showed them this graph that I had found, but most of them, the characters are, like, white. Most of them are boys, which I think in the last couple of years there's a big push of, like, changing that. Because even, like, my librarian, shout out to Julie, she's gotten like so many books this year that are like, you know, more inclusive and different cultures. And so, you know, we read aloud some books together, like a chapter book, and the first one is like Maniac McGee, which is like an old, I don't know, I read it in 5th grade and I ended up liking it, so I read it. Which, you know, is about this kid, white kid, who goes to this town that's like segregated, the blacks on one side, whites on the other side, and he kind of like brings everybody together. But and they all love that book, as old as it is. It's a classic. And then we read Hatchet, which is I've never read it before, but it's a common book people read too, about this kid who like crashes in the Canadian wilderness and has to survive.
Wow.
That book is pretty intense, but either way, and they love, you know, the read aloud books that we do together, because it's like sometimes a higher level and they would read on their own, and like chapter books are more satisfying, but most of them don't finish chapter books on their own. So either way, I'm like, I brought that up again. I was like, okay, so like, you know, you guys loved the 2 books that we read, but like, what about those characters? They were both like white boys. And so that's when I told them, and I was joking with my friend who's the librarian too. I'm like, and I've been telling her for a while, so I'm gonna have this conversation with the kids about just this perspective thing, and like they can see it right here in these books we've already read. And I'm like, and these are the last books we're gonna read from a white boy's perspective. so now we're reading this book, which is about, it's a newer book, and it's about this black girl. She's in 7th grade, and like the Black Lives Matter movement is kind of popping up, and she's like likes to stay out of trouble, so she's trying to figure out like, do I get involved or do I not? And that book's pretty deep too, because it's like there's a court case happening where like a police officer shot a black man that was walking to his car, and so there's like protests happening. It's like all the, you know, the story that's played out so many times. And I actually even, there's a part in the book where they go to a silent protest, and she's saying, you know, there's posters of all these people, and she lists all these names, you know, like Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, and I listed off the names. So I was like, do you guys know any of those names? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, well, Trayvon Martin, like I told them, you know. Some of them were like, oh yeah, I heard of that. And I was like, and that guy didn't go to jail. And they're like, what? And they're like, why? Well, this is Florida, and they have a law that if you're defending yourself, then you're defending yourself. And then I told him about Tamir Rice, and I was like, he was your age, a year older, and about the toy gun. And they're just like, shocked about this stuff. But even in the book, when they were referencing the case and the police officer who was a woman, and that was like a court case that just happened. I forgot the chick's name, but she thought she was going to tase a black man who was going back to his car, and he was in his car, but she shot him.
The Jacob Blake case?
No, somebody else, because I'd only heard about it recently.
Oh, yeah.
I even looked up her name last night so I wouldn't forget, but I forgot it anyways. But anyways, she shot the dude. She thought she was grabbing her taser, but she shot him.
This was in Minnesota,
yeah.
Correct, yes. If anybody knows the name of him, please type it in.
Yeah. I told them about that, and I was like, and actually she just got sentenced, because that's how I heard about it. And I was wrong. I told them 1 year, but I came back today and I was like, actually I was wrong yesterday. It's 2 years, and they were like, that's still not enough.
Yeah, I think it's something right. Something right, I believe.
Yeah. Dante Wright.
Dante Wright, that's what it is, yes.
We don't need the other chick's name.
Yeah, we don't
but honestly, it's the same thing, they're just so, on point, because I told them about that, and they were all shocked. And they're like, saying it's unfair, and then one girl raised her hand, she's like, well, yeah, and I saw... They were just confused about, the taser thing. One kid was like, oh my god, she grabbed the wrong thing, hating out, and I'm like, well, every profession makes mistakes, and that's just, a more life or death one. And then one girl was like, yeah, I saw something on the news, though, where they were saying that they were actually weighing the weight of a taser and weighing a gun, to say that, she should have felt the weight. She's like, and they keep one on their right and one on their left.
She did her research.
Yeah. So, that's why I love 5th grade. And I will miss that kind of, whole group think tank thing, but...
Yeah, okay. Did anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to comment on? I think that's all the topics that I had for today. Thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for everyone for joining the live or joining us and watching. Thank you for being here. Again, thoughts for everybody going through anything in Ukraine. That wild stuff going on over there. Obviously, that's unnecessary war going on. I want to put prayers up for anybody going through any mental health issues. I want to put prayers up for anybody going through any domestic violence issues. I want to put prayers up for yourselves for being here today. I want to put prayers up also for Mother Earth. And thank you for being here on Burn the Wagon, where we're here to burn down patriarchy, capitalism, and above all else, colonialism. Deuces.
Peace.